This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
Hello and welcome to episode 53 of Cooking with Grief, the audio fiddle to a burning Rome. I'm Christopheles, 393-423, and as ever, I'm joined by my similarly timelined and similarly named co-emperor Christianus IV. But not as ever, we're joined... Sorry, did you want to talk?
I thought normally that's my cue to say hello and comment on the ridiculous title you're giving me this week. But apparently we should have rehearsed.
There is no rehearsing this thing, and you know that by now. So sal away to you, my co-emperor / co-host. But not as ever, we're joined by a very special guest co-host. He didn't start the fire, in fact it was always burning, but he does document the fire, and to continue this sort of sacking of Rome analogy, he would be one of the Visigoths. From the FireStarters podcast, it's the delightful arsonist Henry. Hello to you both.
Oh, hello. So, who are we sacking again?
Rome.
I'm going to put my sword on the scale, and you just fill it in until there's enough gold, okay?
I wasn't prepared for actually, historically accurate facts.
Chris is quickly scrolling through Wikipedia now to see what's this.
I thought we were doing historical improv.
How are we all doing? How are we enjoying the end times / the optimistic beginnings of 2021?
I'm looking forward to Chris's reaction to this, because you had a great one the other day where you said, we're in an endless ocean of nothingness or something.
That is basically what we're in. Just time has no meaning anymore. Everything simultaneously feels like it happened yesterday and also about 10 years ago.
Well, have you ever had a conversation with your colleagues where they're like... oh, this movie came out last year. They're like, no, it was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Last year just didn't happen.
Yeah.
You just think it was last year.
Yeah, no, it wasn't about films, but yeah, I've had exactly that conversation where I referred to stuff as last year, and then it's like, nope, not last year. 2019. How are you, Chris, as well? Because I realised that me and Henry both answered, how are you? We're fine. just don't even bother to return the courtesy.
Yeah, we don't care about you.
Well, that's absolutely fine. I mean, the fall of empire is heavy on my mind, so I'm not doing too bad, actually. Yeah, well, like you say, it's, as you said many times before, then the global pandemic really has been the death of small talk, that every episode, well, the past 10 episodes or whatever it's been, we've got nothing to say to each other because I get up, I go to work, and I return home.
And that's more than me, because I work from home, which means I get up, I am at work, and then I am at home at the end.
It's not like a upward or downward spiral. It's just like a lazy lagoon of a life.
What's that snake that eats its own tail? Like Erebus.
Erebus, yeah.
That is our life.
I thought, for some reason, I thought it was Jormungand, but that's the Norse thing, isn't it?
Which actually also eats its own tail. So there we go.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the time serpent, or whatever it's called.
The world serpent.
Yeah, that world serpent, yeah, that's it. So we're essentially, no matter what mythological sort of destination, then it's just...
That is the one way I have to measure in time. Not in Norse
calendar.
Not in Roman calendars. But, basically by what I've been obsessed with. So, start of lockdown, I was obsessed with, back in March, whatever, I was obsessed with, I was learning Japanese. Then I lost interest in that, and I started trying to relearn the guitar, but then I quickly lost interest in that. Then I got obsessed with Norse mythology, and so I've read books and stuff on that, and all that stuff. And now we've come full circle, and I'm back to learning Japanese, and that's that is one cycle.
Is there any way you could combine all three? Did the Vikings ever make it to Japan?
That would be a cool film, but I don't think so. Although they did have trade relations with China.
Oh, okay.
They went further than you think.
Well, maybe further than you think.
That's true. It's that thing, innit? It's we always assume that people in the olden days just didn't move from their village, and then we find out that there's a reason that every single civilization spent all their money on boats.
I gotta get out of here.
So, like big projections for the coming year. Arcs are going to see a big comeback.
Let's be honest, there's probably billionaires have already started work on building an arc to ride out whatever's coming next.
Yeah, just a big space arc or spark.
Yeah. Oh, you guys describing SpaceX?
Oh yeah,
It's essentially, yeah. But like that's it. We've got, on our modest, indie podcast budget, we've got like a dinghy, a rented dinghy that we can, get a little bit past. I don't know, Western Supermare.
The apocalypse must happen within these 5 days, otherwise I gotta return the dinghy.
Exactly. Yeah.
I always thought Western Supermare like has delusions of grandeur, like as a place name, because it's sort of like they could everywhere else is it's like Southend on Sea. Like, that's all Western Supermare means is Western on Sea, but we're like, no, we're going to go with the pretentious Latin version.
It's like towns that insist on including Royal because a royal visited there once. Like, oh no, it's not Tunbridge Wells, it's Royal Tunbridge Wells.
That's a thing.
It's like,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's because like Prince Charles bought a cornetto there or something once in like 1974, and it's like, okay, well we're a royal city now or royal town.
This has been the weirdest small talk ever, by the way.
Oh yeah, I thought this was
because
normal.
there's no small talk to have. That's the thing. We've got to talk about royals and cornettos. Well, it's a good reminder to crack on. So here's how the podcast works. A little different to usual. Rather than the two topics you'd normally hear from Chris and I, this time we've outsourced two topics to our guest, and we'll provide you only with one each, allowing us to take it easy for a bit. And if this goes well, we're going to have two guest co-hosts a week, really allowing us to transition smoothly from the lineup, like a boy band that no longer includes any of its founding members, but retains the same name for marketing clout. So without any further unnecessary delay, we'll start off with Henry's first topic.
Yes, so the first fact is by me, so if you want to skip a wet 7 minutes, please go ahead.
That's ambitious that you think it's only going to be 7 minutes. We can waffle.
So, I have a question for you guys.
Ooh.
You guys are in the Manchester region. Have you been to Merseyside much?
Surprisingly, not that often. It's one of those weird things, because it's like, I've been like twice, even though it's only like, 45 minutes away. And
Yeah, but why would you come here? It's like just it's a place with less stuff than your hometown.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's the same,
You got purple bins. What more do you want?
Well, no, that's exactly it. It's like Manchester, Leeds, and Liverpool. They're all like, whenever you meet somebody, like, and they're like, "Oh, have you ever been to like, or do you ever go to the other one?" You're like, "Well, no," because they're all basically like identical. Like, they've all got their own personalities and stuff, but like, in terms of like,
but we're like a smaller version of you.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of things to actually go, it's like, oh yeah, well, you can go to the shop that you've got here. Or there's another branch of the same restaurant or whatever.
Exactly, yeah, you can go to Next. Ooh, Next. But a different Next. They'll probably have similar stock.
Instead of the Next being beside the Debenhams, it's the Debenhams beside the Tesco. You guys haven't been to the Wirral?
Oh, the posh plastic scousers. That's all I know.
Yeah, sure, posh.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all relative.
For the people who don't know, the Wirral is basically the northern bit of England that just borders Wales, right? Mm-hmm. And there's an area in there called Birkenhead, which is the opposite of posh because we all make fun of how rough it is. But I have a friend who used to live there, and I had to take a taxi there to see him and his family, right? And whenever I'm in the fucking taxi, the driver always tells me the exact same fact. And I end up only knowing two facts about Birkenhead. One is that...
Wait, is this a different taxi guy that tells you these facts, or do you end up with the same taxi guy every time?
No, different taxi guys.
Right, wow.
No.
There's only one fact in Birkenhead, apparently, that they know. Right, and it's that the Birkenhead Park is the inspiration to Central Park in New York, because it's one of the first publicly funded civic park in the world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I haven't been myself, even despite hearing that fact so many times.
Well, the fifth time, like the sheer coincidence, like, oh yeah, it's actually inspiration for Central Park, and you're like, interesting. I will never go there. Thank you. Good day, sir.
Yeah, pretty much. But I have a second fact about Birkenhead that I replied to the drivers.
Oh, wow.
And
you counted the facts with other facts.
Yes, exactly. And the tale begins in 1852.
Okay.
Or 1555 if you believe in the phantom time hypothesis.
Oh, you're better at calling back our own episodes than we are.
So, yes, a frigate was built in Birkenhead, right? They decided to call it, like, the HMS Vanguard, and then they're like, no, let's just call it HMS Birkenhead because it's built in Birkenhead. They used it this year in 1852 for what the British does best, committing atrocities aboard.
Oh, that is something we're very good at.
Yep, a lot of practice.
So they were transporting like British soldiers to South Africa to fight in the 8th Xhosa War. A war so good they have 9 of them. They left Portsmouth and they picked up like a bunch of like soldiers, and then some officers and their family and their kids and their relatives for some reason to go to war.
War is fun for the whole family.
It was the Centre Parks of its day.
February, they left like Portsmouth. They went to Ireland to pick up some people, and they reached like Simonstown near Cape Town, and they refueled. And they're like, okay, we're running a bit short on time. We probably shouldn't have pissed about so much. So they left on the February 25th, and the captain, his name is Captain Salmon, I think. It's like salmon with a D in the end.
Okay.
But I want to call him Salmon for the nominative determinism of being a captain in the sea.
We'll call him Captain Salmon.
Yeah, Captain Salmon's like, oh, we're going to be late for the war, you know? The atrocity's not going to... commit themselves. So we're gonna cut the time by hugging the shore. I shit you not, on the morning of February 26th at 2 a.m., right? They reach an area called Danger Point.
That sounds friendly. We should go.
We definitely should left our guard down in a place called Danger Point. And it's called that because there's like really treacherous reefs and rocks around the coast, and also it's infested with sharks.
Even better.
So I don't think they got the memo. So they're just like fucking about, and then they hit an uncharted rock at the stern, and it just goes really downhill from there. The captain got on board, and Captain Salmon's like, okay, back her up, right? But when they backed up, a hole was created and water rushed in, causing the ship to once again bash into the same rock, but this time exposing their engine room to the rock. So it starts flooding and people start drowning. Like 100 soldiers just die immediately, basically. The other like survivors of the other 500, with the kids and the woman, they're like, okay, what we're gonna do? Should we all get off now? We have boats. We have like these 2 boats that are like can carry 150 people each, and some other lifeboats, right? They're like, okay, check the boats. They put one of the big boats out, and it immediately sunk.
Good start.
and then the second boat, they're like, oh, we forgot to do maintenance on this one. We can't use this one either. And in a rare instance where people actually acted heroically in history, they're all like, okay, send all the kids and women off on the few lifeboats we have off first, and we're all gonna stay here and we'll think of what to do. And then like after like 20 minutes pass, the captains are like, yeah, we're all gonna be doomed. I'll go down the ship, but all of you just like swim away now. But then the other officer, he basically said like, no, you all halt, because if you catch up now, you might actually grab onto the lifeboats and doom all the women and children. So he gave an order for all of them to stop, and only 3 soldiers like jumped off the ship to try to get away. They all basically stood there for like another half hour, and then eventually like all of them drowned except for like 50 people who managed to swim the few like 4 miles onto the coast, because the people who did try to swim either didn't make it or got eaten by sharks.
It's just unnecessary to have Danger Point and have sharks. Like,
who decided to build this level? It just seems unfair.
I was gonna say, it's like a video game where there's one of those areas where it's just like the water's instant death. So you're just like, why though? And it's like, sharks.
Also they had 9 horses with them, so they pushed the horses off the boats, and 8 of them actually made it on shore, and one of them broke their legs and died, but 8 of the horses made it.
Better to be a horse.
Yeah, and so in the end, there's about like 100 survivors, and it's a very tragic event. But it is the first time in recorded history that they use women and children first when a boat sank or a ship sank. And they call this thing the Birkenhead drill ever since.
Oh, really? I feel like I've heard of the term Birkenhead drill. And then I just ignored it.
Obviously, we just say women and children first, and it's most famous in Titanic, where they actually did the same thing as well.
I read something about Titanic where, I was looking at, the stats, and it's how many men, women, children died from each class.
Okay. Do you remember?
And I can't remember the numbers, but I remember seeing that basically third class, everybody. Basically, it was about the same numbers because basically they all were left to drown.
Right.
And then first class, because rich people are dicks, they most of the men survived and stuff because they were just women and children first. No, I'm posh. I go first. And then it was basically second class, or the class that were actually, the ones who were sort of it's that thing where it's the rich. The upper class decide all the rules but then don't follow them, and then it's sort of the middle class are the only ones that take the rules seriously. So in the middle class, all the men died because they actually were the only ones that followed it.
I think it is some kind of stat 75% of the women on Titanic survived, whereas only is 15% of men.
Yeah.
But so we're oh yeah, people on ships are they must use this drill all the time, yeah. But not quite true. So an economist called Mikael Elinda and Oscar Eriksson from the University of Uppsala in Sweden, right? They studied 18 major shipwrecks between 1852 and 2011, and they found that it was the opposite. Apart from the Birkenhead and Titanic, all other times the men's survival rate was way higher than women and children. So the average survival rate for men was 37%. A woman was 27 and children was 15.
They're really just move, children, you're small.
Get away, you're in the way. So they ended their study of saying rather than women and children first, the actual axiom is every man to himself.
The free market will decide.
Well, do you remember that the Costa Concordia, the Italian ship, where the captain was the first off? The captain had made it all the way back to land or something whilst the ship was still sinking.
Did you listen to the phone call?
No.
Yeah, and the lifeguard's telling him to get back on that fucking boat, and he's like, "No, I want to live."
Yeah. Well, the guy, I think that guy was some kind of governor or something, because he ordered him to go on. He's like, "You will get on that boat." I swear to God, there's the whole the whole conversation is recorded and it's online, and it's just 10 minutes of him yelling at him to tell him to get on the fucking boat. And the captain, he asked him go on the boat. He's like, "Yeah, but it's dark and it's cold."
He got arrested, didn't he, in the end?
Yeah, he did get arrested, yes.
Because captains aren't supposed to sink boats, turns out.
He was really bad at his job.
He's like, "Ooh, seaweed, it's slimy." Ooh. When you said that this is your return fact for the taxi drivers, do you tell them the whole story, and then it ends with graphic statistics about how few people survive shipwrecks, and then it's just a really awkward taxi ride the rest of the way there? Or do you just tell them about the drill or the fleet?
I just said the woman and children drill is formerly called the Birkenhead drill. Yeah, I just say that.
He's like, "Oh, there's a really famous park," and you're like, "Way more people drown than people think." And he's like, "Jesus Christ."
Children die first in shipwrecks. Only 15% survive.
Danger point is dangerous. Okay. Right, well, thank you very much. I think we'll hand it over to Chris for your only fact this week.
Okay, so for my one and only topic, I'm going to talk about, it's yet another mad lad, but this one's, only semi-war related, because you know how much we love a mad lad on
Is this person going to hide under a nun's robe this time?
Oh, no, this man does not hide. This man sees danger, runs towards it, or, as you'll find out, he goes a lot faster than a run. So, basically, have you ever, either of you two, ever been in I'd ask a plane crash, but it's probably unlikely, but more likely a car crash or something like that? Anything where your seatbelt's not necessarily saved your life, but you know.
It was on the minibus, and I didn't have my seatbelt on, so I crashed into the window behind the bus driver and shattered the glass. Yeah, and I just have a scar on my left arm now for that. It wasn't too bad.
I'll tell you, this Matt, John Stapp, my topic for today, would be very upset with you for not wearing your seatbelt, because this is a man who basically helped. I mean, I don't think he invented the seatbelt or anything like that, but he led the way and basically helped invent all these car crash safety standards, and he was sort of the driving force behind it.
Driving force, I get it.
But he was actually what he sort of pioneered, and then he sort of co-opted it for cars. He was the guy behind the ejector seat.
Oh.
So he's called, because he was in the army, he was in the Air Force, but also had like a medical degree and a PhD and stuff. He's Dr. Colonel John Stapp. I mean, he's called Dr. Colonel. He was born in like 1910 or whatever, so he like in World War II he joined the Air Force, but he'd already had, like I say, so he was of an age where before the war, he'd gone to medical school, or rather, he had a master's in zoology, then he did chemistry, then he did biophysics, and then eventually he got a job as a medical degree.
Take a lane.
So he's already got all the degrees.
Take a lane.
Yeah. He's like that guy. Have you seen the guy in like the last few years? In fact, he's just been selected for NASA's new moon mission.
Oh.
Who was a Navy SEAL.
Uh-huh.
Then he became a doctor from Harvard, like with his degree from Harvard, and then he became an astronaut. And it's just like, you don't get to do all these things. It's just like living every child's dream. So there's this guy. He's a doctor, and then World War II breaks out, so he joined the Air Force the US Air Force,
right.
Since he's American.
Yeah.
As a doctor. And then basically, after the war, he was sort of like, he was looking and they was trying to work out why, like, some crashes people survived and some crashes people died.
Right.
When they looked relatively similar crashes, and he wanted to see, work out what the reasons were. And rather than doing some sort of like pussy science with like numbers and simulators and stuff like that, he decided to make a high-speed sled powered by rockets on a 2,000 foot long track and strapped himself to it. So he named the sled G-Whiz
because he really needs the pee.
Yeah. So this was to develop a harness, like an effective seatbelt, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, and so in 1947 he decided to test his new sled, and so basically this sled, like I say, it's on tracks and has rockets, and you face backwards, basically.
Huh.
So your chair heads behind you. Yeah, and then you go sort of rocket down this track backwards. And he refused anesthetics because he wanted to learn how he would react psychologically as well as physiologically. Yeah, so first time he did it, they accelerated to 90 miles an hour and then stopped again to a sudden stop, which caused 10 Gs of force. And after that, he apparently had a few sore muscles, but was otherwise fine. So then take two, accelerates up to 150 miles an hour, and then stopped in 19 feet. So that was 35 G.
Jesus Christ.
So, if I recall, I think 8 or 9 G is usually like when people start to pass out.
Yeah.
Or I think you're unlikely to... most people have passed out by 8 or 9 G. So he's just done 35 G. And he suffered headaches, concussions, a fractured rib, fractured wrist, and a hemorrhaged retina. And he said, I quote, and this is him talking afterwards, the men at the mahogany desks thought the human body could never take 18 Gs, and here we are taking twice that with no sweat. So then his commanding officer found out that he'd been his own test dummy, so told him to stop. Stapp secretly continued to use do the tests on chimpanzees.
Oh, fucking hell.
And then when the chimpanzees were still not dying, he...
not good enough, why are you not dead?
Well, he found that they could withstand quite high forces, so he's like, all right, started doing it again on himself secretly, because he's basically like,
I love the word secretly. How the hell do you go on a rocket-powered 200-foot sledge? Like, what was that, microwave?
It just reminds me of that.
Has that been invented yet?
Bit where there's like Aurora Borealis at this time of the year in this location.
Concentrate entirely in your kitchen.
May I see it? No. So anyway, he decides to do even more tests. He did actually manage to get 11 other volunteers, but before each other volunteer did it, he tested it on himself anyway.
Like he's tough but fair, you know.
Exactly. So then he broke some more bones and stuff.
Well, he's a doctor. It's fine.
Then, yeah, exactly. And then they invented supersonic planes, and they were wondering how to like bail out, because obviously before, like back in like World War II and stuff, when people, you know, like you see in like the old films and stuff, like when somebody's Spitfire gets shot down, like they just open the window and jump out. Like that was how you got out of a plane. Like it was fine. And they were like, you can't do that if your plane's going supersonic.
Just like in the commercial, it's like, isn't there a better way?
Yeah, that's basically it. So he was like, right, how are we going to jump out of a plane when it's going supersonic? So he made a new, even higher speed sled. This one doesn't have a whimsical name. It was just called Sonic Winged Number 1.
Okay.
And so he started off with dummies, and it had loads of sensors and stuff to see what's going on. And he found that the test dummy withstood much higher forces than he experienced. So he decided to, once again, same with the chimpanzees. When the dummy didn't die, he was like, oh, well, I'd better test it on me. In March 1954, he sat on it himself and went 421 miles an hour
Jesus Christ.
on a rocket-powered sled. And this sled, literally, is just him on a seat.
Facing backwards.
Yeah, at 421 miles an hour. Again, he was like thinking how to make so then he basically, I don't think it is him who came up with the ejector seat, but he was one to like test, you know, how fast could you eject somebody out of a plane, basically, without them dying. So once again, he decided to find out the maximum stress that a pilot could endure. Got on a sled that simulated an ejector seat, and for once he did wear a helmet. And apparently he tied himself to he didn't tie himself, but he was properly strapped into the seat. He went so fast. He went super fast, then the brakes, all within this short span. I don't actually have the distance they did this in. But basically, he managed to get all the way up to 632 miles an hour, which is faster than a bullet fired from a gun.
Oh my God.
And he went so fast, and like there's so much force that his lungs collapsed, and he lost sight in his eyes.
Oh my God.
But he recovered from both of those things and set the ground speed record at 632 miles an hour and wasn't in a car or anything like that.
I feel like he's
just on the chair.
He's a terrible test subject because he's superhuman compared to the average person. They're like, yep, didn't leave a scratch for me, but then the average person will die from the impact.
Well, that's it. Like, if he's setting the baseline, then it's like, okay, well, he's clearly insane. So whatever he can withstand, let's halve it, and then the average person at their max will do that. He also sounds like the kind of bloke who will, like, brush off injuries, you know, normally career-ending injuries like collapsed lungs. Like, you know when you get water in your ears and you just, you hold your nose and blow out your ears to get rid of water, and he's just like, apologies, gents, my lungs appear to have collapsed. Also, I've gone blind. Also, I'm covered in chimpanzee guts. Forgot he was back there.
Also, just to go back to, you know, we're talking about how much G's you withstood. So for this 630 mile an hour one, he got 46 G forces, which is the equivalent of basically 4 tons on your chest. And apparently, he did want to do one at 1,000 miles an hour, and he was banned.
They're like, please stop.
please stop.
At that point, they're like, I know you've got 50 degrees, but get off our scientific base.
His general's like, haha, you got me once with that Aurora Borealis thing. Not again.
No, there is not a bear over there. I will not look the other way. Get off that fucking rocket.
Yeah, and then... just to round off the story, he then went to work for the US's National Highways Safety Association.
Oh.
So and that's where it come full circle. He was basically, presumably, his recommendations are just, humans can survive anything. Like, honestly.
Yeah, turns out
stick rockets on all the cars, you'll probably survive.
Yeah.
I just imagine that once in a while they'll come with like a problem they've never seen before. He's like, well, you know what that means? Give me my helmet and my chimpanzee.
Okay, and on that note, Henry, I'm going to hand the helmet and the chimpanzee over to you.
Oh, thank you. We need this for my next topic. So let me ask another question.
It's about the Bonobo Wars of 1812.
A war so good they had 20 of them. Yeah, so I'll ask you guys this. You can answer individually because you guys don't have the same mind as far as I'm aware. If you were to be able to live in any time in history, where would you live?
Oh, this is one of those ones where part of me always wants to be like, oh, I'd love to like live in ancient Rome, and because it's like my favorite and most interesting period. And the part of me thinks, nope, because I'd probably die of dysentery like age 13, like modern times, and like every objective level, being born when I was born is probably the best time.
Yeah, do you ever think about how bad the past must smell?
Yeah.
Like, no dental hygiene,
Yeah.
no, like, antiperspirant, like...
Even just being able to eat things that you don't have to be like, like imagine being like, oh, I really want like...
Sushi during the Renaissance.
Or just being like, oh, I'd like to have, I don't know, I was just trying to think then. But like, say you wanted an apple, and then it's being like, well, nope, the apples aren't ripe for another 6 months, so tough shit.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is you think about, like, medieval kings sending fleets off to get spices, and we can walk to the nearest shop and get a microwave, like... gel phrasing. Whereas, you had to be royalty to get, like, a bit of cumin,
And that microwave gel phrasing has more salt than the entire medieval Finnish ate.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yes.
So, hygiene of the past aside, I reckon Qin Dynasty China.
Okay, not too
Sort
bad.
of
like early,
like-
not late,
like-
I hope.
So like, sort of Imperial China, that like, Shi Huangdi's on the throne, unified China. They've got like currency. I'd go then. I think it'd be a really interesting time. And
Luckily, that's the video. I said earlier. Well, I've said off air, but I've been learning about ancient China. Luckily, the part where I'm up to is I've just got to the end of that dynasty, so I actually know what you're talking about.
Nice.
all right, I thought you were worried about spoilers.
No, I was just going to say
no,
that.
no.
If you'd said-
Don't
yeah.
tell me about the later Han.
If you'd said this 2 weeks ago, I would have been like, the what now? The who?
Ooh, I hope this Napoleon guy wins and takes over all of Europe. Yeah, so I have the same gripes as Chris, where I probably just think that everything's really gross and smelly. I'm probably like, I love living in the present. Like, people always like, oh, isn't it great in the back of good old days? I'm like, no, it wasn't. People were racist and smelly.
Yeah.
I can like endlessly scroll Twitter and Reddit. There's one era that I probably wouldn't mind too much in living if I have to go like, more than like 100 years past. And that era is Edo Japan, which is like 1700s, 1800s Japan. And the reason for that is because it wasn't actually that smelly there.
But were the people racist?
Yes, very much.
Well, 1 out of 2 isn't bad.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the one like you should aim for.
I can stomach the racism, but I absolutely draw the line that smells.
You gotta pick a lane. Yeah, but the reason it didn't smell is because of good old market forces.
Oh, that's good. Also, sorry, I was just thinking then that is one of those quotes that could just be just cut out, taken out of context, and just haunt me for the rest of my life.
Say what you want about the KKK, they know the way around soap.
They know how to keep things white.
So anyway, before we get cancelled.
So, so if you were going back to like 16th, 17th century London, for instance, would have been pretty shitty because like people just emptied their chamber pots out the window. Like there's horse pooping on the streets everywhere. No one gave a damn, right? And like obviously it was a big problem because it's a huge spread of typhoid and cholera and such, right? But if you were to go to 1700s Japan, in Edo especially, you don't see any of this shit. You just like see like pretty much pristine streets. For listeners who don't know, between like 1600s and 1800s Japan, speaking of racism, they had this like basically like national mandate, like no one could enter or leave. Where basically, they only do trade with like a handful of Koreans and Chinese and the Dutch for some reason. but like no one's allowed to leave or enter. Yeah.
They didn't have a law as well where like basically any foreigners that weren't in like one specific port town, like
Yeah,
where the
Nagasaki.
Dutch were or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone, if you saw a foreigner outside of Nagasaki, you could kill them on the spot.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So, yeah.
It is like,
Super
it is
racist.
yeah. So 1 out of 2 ain't bad. Anyway, yeah. So it was kind of like those biomes. People keep in like those glass jars where they put a bit of mud, a bit of like water in it, and then just seal the jar, and they just give it heat, and you wait 20 years, and it has its own like ecology, basically. Yeah, Japan's a bit like that. They just develop their own stuff that's a bit different to the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. So, going back further back, like in the 600s, they actually had like the emperor decree that you're not allowed to eat meat anymore because it's wrong and sinful. Yeah. And I'm not sure if it's not actually officially law, I think, but like it just developed this national taboo against eating meat apart from fish, and that's why like there's such a fish-eating country to this day. So you got the 1600s, they closed the border, and it's an era of peace because after the the warring era, and population is growing, people are moving to cities, right? There's a huge demand on like vegetables. And then to keep up with demand, there's like a huge basically we need to really, really get good at farming. So this is where fertilizers come in, right?
Where was this going?
This is the main fact. I'm going to tell you about the economics of human waste in Edo, Japan.
Again.
The earliest instance of them using shimugoe or night soil was in the 1500s, but that's only for the really smart farmers who read the latest research on poop.
You've got to be up on the poop news.
Yeah, you got to be really like the normal people, the average person didn't know this is the thing. You can use human poop as fertilizer. And even in 1649, there's a really famous edict called the Keian Edict by the Tokugawa government. It basically tell people how to properly behave as good citizens. And one of the section is telling them how to dispose of their human waste and to use it as for fertilizer, and saying don't keep it out in the rain, it's bad for the poop.
To quote the translation directly.
Yeah, it's bad for the poop, yeah. So in the late 1600s, this one guy just wrote a book called the Nogyo Sensho, which means the Compendium of Agriculture. And this guy spent 40 years reading all the Chinese literature he can find about farming, and then experimenting on his own, and wrote 10 volumes just talking about how to farm.
Well, it's like the Farmer's Almanac here.
Yeah, it's like that, yeah. And he details how to use human waste to fertilize and make really, really good crops. And similarly, another book, a guy goes into detail about how to install toilets so farmer can easily collect the night soil effectively. The same author claimed that if you give him poop, he can look at it and tell you how rich that person was from judging their diet. And he said if it's a rich person's poop, it's more valuable because they ate more fish.
And just to clarify, this is the time in history you would most like to live in.
It created a world where people really, really value poop. And so they don't throw it in the streets. And they all, instead of really smelly streets, they're no, why would I throw away valuable poop and pee?
Rich people were essentially printing their own money.
Yeah.
Just on the toilet.
Apparently, the poop from the emperors or the shogun's household were really, really expensive because they ate really good food. But there must be a diminishing return where it's probably not worth 200 quid to buy a bucket of pee from the shogun, because poop was so valuable and everyone started using it for farming. Yeah, the farmers had to do a side gig where they either do it themselves or they hire people to go door to door to ask people to buy their poop, because it became so valuable. Yeah, the landlords said you know what, I'm gonna. They somehow got to pass as an official law, if you're renting the place, the poop belongs to the landlord. But the tenant owns their own pee. I don't know why they made that distinction. Yeah, the price eventually got so ridiculous that I think a household of 7 people can produce enough poop that's sold for enough money that can buy enough rice to feed a person for a year, every year. So every 7 person just have like buy 7 get 1 free for food, you know?
Well, it sounds like those adverts for Oxfam that always tell you to like 50 quid a month will like buy a donkey for whatever. It's like just one decent shit a month could buy enough rice to feed a family of 4 for a week. Please, shit now.
Because like most people live in the urban centers and they're richer, yeah? Farmers started just like, they just created this huge like urban fringe where people just farm on the outskirts of cities because they're like, oh, I can travel less to get my fertilizer this way, and also I'm gonna sell the vegetables I grow to said people. So they just, because of this market for poop, like a lot of the major cities just have like tons and tons of farms around them. I think it like has a lasting impact to this day.
So why did they move away from poop then?
Well, I'll get to that. So,
okay. Sorry, I don't want to jump ahead of your poop story.
So, the reason that Japan in particular, right, had this huge obsession with like poop fertilizer is because, one, they're really mountainous, right, the country, so they don't have the best farmland compared to other countries. And number 2, because as I mentioned earlier, that they're mainly vegetarians, they don't keep a lot of domestic animals that can produce waste as fertilizer. So they really, really need the population's poop to fertilize their plants. And like it got so ridiculous that like 1 in 4 ships coming into like Edo or Tokyo port carried like poop from Osaka or other cities. And people start complaining about the smell, but they're like, what you gonna do about it? It's a huge part of the economy. And the same ships like that carry the poop into Tokyo would like carry food back to Osaka. You were saying like why is it not a thing now? Well, it's because like we have actual other good fertilizers now. They don't need to rely on human poop. But it is interesting. It's actually a double-edged sword. So you know, like in the 1700s, it smells really nice and it's clean compared to like a Western cities, right? But then in the 1800s and early 1900s, we started having sewer systems and we have the modern toilet, right? And then we all, like, the engineers, like, offered Japan, it's like, do you want to build this as well? And then the Japanese were like, why would we flush away good poop into the sewers? No, thank you. So, like, Japan, like, as a modern, like, as, like, a developed country, is, like, one of the latest countries to have, like, a full sewage system in the whole country. I think it's only, like, 1980s when they fully completed, like, the modern sewage system. Yeah, so to answer my own question of where would I live, I would live in Edo, Japan, and open a bookstore and take advantage of the Maliko Aokiya phenomenon and make a killing.
And there you go again, proving that you listen to our episodes more than we do. What a callback. Also, just on that, we have had people say, me and Chris have both had some, like conversations in real life with people who have listened to that and said that they too experience that sensation when they go into
in the
a bookshop.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's not just Japanese people.
Oh, interesting. But have you heard of? Because I think I asked you about this before. But have you heard of latchkey incontinence?
Yeah, you told me about it. I've forgotten it.
Yeah, I get that. It's like it's the phenomenon for people who don't know is when you're at your doorstep to your house. And you open the door, you just have this sudden urge to pee or go to the toilet. Like, but the problem with me is that I live in an apartment, like on like the 5th floor, right? The moment I enter the ground floor, I have the urge to pee, but then I have to like either climb like five flights of stairs or wait for the lift. I'm like, come on, hurry up! This is desperate. And if you see me in the lift, I'll be like doing a dance like, must not wet myself.
Or your neighbours just think you're constantly cross-legged, and it's like, how does he walk?
Yeah, that's me. I'll hand over the poop covered chimpanzee to Chris then.
So for my one and only topic to close us out, I'm going to talk about one element of the British summer. Not stifling heat trapped inside triple insulated Victorian walls, nor packed stretches of dirty sand masquerading as a beach, overpriced cornettos, or even the complaints about the weather from a population that spent the last 6 months complaining about how fucking cold it is. But no, my topic is about something much more sort of nefarious and invasive. So I'll ask both of you: have either of you had any bad experiences with seagulls?
Genuinely, no.
Not personally.
How about hypothetically then?
The only annoying thing is that I used to have to do night shifts in the hospital I work at. For some reason, there's like a nest of seagulls, or I should say, a flock of seagulls, like living on top of the hospital, and then like by like 3-4 a.m. you just hear seagulls like screaming, and it just wakes me up.
Yeah, I mean that's not only are they aggressive and bold, but they're also loud motherfuckers. Okay, so my topic is about some seagulls that proved even more dangerous than the usual chip stealing variety. So Sellafield is a nuclear power plant and storage facility located on the coast of Cumbria in the northwest of England, not far from the England-Scotland border.
My one interaction with Sellafield is that I grew up in Ireland, and in primary school, as one of the English projects, they got us all to write a protest letter to Sellafield.
I feel that's like highly politicised for young kids.
It is weird. I was in primary school, and they just told us like to as a school project to write like a letter to Sellafield telling them to close down because if an accident were to happen, the fallout would affect Ireland.
Yeah, a bunch of engineers like receiving crudely like scrawled letters in crayon going like nuclear bad, and it's like Jesus, what fucking
Well,
left-wing teachers have they got over there? Yeah, true, I guess. Well, I mean, maybe this story will put credence to their, your teacher's dire warnings, because Sellafield have been having problems with radioactive seagulls.
Oh no!
Do they have superpowers?
I'll get to that. And I'll get to that now. No, but I should have teased you a little longer. But so seagulls have for over a decade been getting into open fuel storage ponds throughout the facility, and they become contaminated by low level waste. I mean, this wouldn't ordinarily be a problem because it's like very low levels of radioactivity, but then they fly off and
to Ireland.
yeah, specifically.
Wait, low level waste. Are we talking about human fertilizer again?
We are not. We are moving swiftly on. We're moving with a much more salacious topic of radioactive waste. But no, they fly off. They expose like the population to low levels of radioactivity. They make the nests and they keep hard to track of. You think they're bad now, just swooping down and taking the flake out of your 99. But you wait until they're glowing bright green and stealing your chips with mutated tentacles. If I've completely failed to understand science, then so be it. But here's where it gets good. I don't know how either of you two would propose to contain the problem. Maybe a net over these open storage pools. Maybe, them sort of spikes that you get on like fish ponds. But what Sellafield Limited, the company that runs the nuclear site, has done is hire a specialist firm to undertake the job of controlling the seagulls in and I quote, a safe and humane manner that would cause the gulls minimal distress and suffering. And that safe and humane manner is hiring snipers to take the seagulls out.
Oh, wow.
Oh my god.
I was going to suggest radioactive, like, hawks. Swoop in.
And then you have a radioactive hawk problem, so you get radioactive snakes, then you need radioactive mongoose. It always comes back to the mongoose or mongooses. And then what kills mongooses are bears.
No, you wait for the winter to come.
Okay, so you need a nuclear winter. That sounds awful. I think that's what the Cold War was warning about.
Like, I thought that it would be something like way more expensive and stupid. Like how
what, like a mech?
Sure. No, like have you heard about the raccoon bins in Toronto?
No, great band, but I've not followed their work.
No, but so apparently in Canada they have a big problem with raccoons getting into their bins and throwing out like the contents everywhere. Mm-hmm. So Toronto, the city council thought it'd be a good idea to spend 31 million Canadian dollars to engineer and build a new bin that is raccoon proof. and then within a month, like the raccoons figure out how to get in anyway.
But to me, I'd say that seems more sensible, despite the cost. That seems more sensible than saying, "Well, we're gonna the city of the
Snipe all the raccoons.
Yeah, we're gonna get raccoon snipers, which are not like traitor raccoons that you've trained to use a sniper gun. They're humans trained to kill, raccoons. But it just seems snipers were such like a, I don't know. It seems so excessive when
It does, yeah.
when a tight net over these pools would probably do.
Is there a reason why they didn't go for something easy like that?
It's just much cooler. It's so that they could have people whose legitimate CVs says like radioactive seagull sniper.
Like, it feels like these people who were managing Sellafield were the people who were like managing the Falklands War.
Yeah, again, a great throwback to an episode I
Yeah.
don't especially remember, but
Yeah.
I'm sure there was a mad lad involved.
Yeah. Well, I don't think you mentioned this, but like in the Falklands War, one of the regiment we're gonna surprise attack the Argentines. We can go south, east, or west. We have the technological advantage, but we're gonna climb over a glacier to surprise them. And then after an hour, they had to be rescued and lost a helicopter in the process.
It's that sort of level of and the thing is, they might have talked it up. It's probably one dude called Keith with an air rifle, but that doesn't sound as cool as a specialist team of seagull snipers. But what's interesting, well, maybe that's what, but another thing is that there's so many of these birds that they can't dispose of them, because obviously you can't just send them off because they've got traces of radioactivity.
Yeah.
So they have to be stored in specially built freezers, which are reaching capacity with, quote, an expanding mountain of radioactive seagulls, which is...
Can't they just dispose of them where they have to dispose all the rest of the
Well,
waste?
yeah, I mean, that's it. Once they're
surely
dead,
they're
they're not...
already used
Yeah,
to this.
the problem is that they're flying off. Once you eliminate their ability to fly, fatally, then surely, yeah, you can just keep them in the storage pools with all the, fusion rods or whatever. But no, apparently... I feel like scientists tend not to, they tend to explain, well, maybe they should not, they tend not to over-dramatize things, but an expanding mountain of radioactive seagulls is not like a calming sentence that makes you think that the situation is under control. First of all, it makes you think that, the mass is actually swelling and they're going to form one king radioactive seagull, like the king rats you find, or rat kings. But, at the minute, there is no current solution because they're running out of freezer space filled with dead radioactive seagulls.
It truly is this is something that our children will have to figure out.
Well, there's that whole thing with how they, I think we covered this on an old episode, where they've got to think of ways to warn future generations about radioactive waste and stuff, and they're trying to think of ways to
beyond
convey
language.
that there's convey that there's danger there, and possibly in the future where whatever languages are spoken today aren't spoken.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, just imagine the intrepid future explorer who delves into the ancient ruins and finds a freezer full of dead seagulls and just has to go what the fuck am I supposed to do with these?
And it's a future where seagulls are a delicacy, and they didn't know it's radioactive.
Yeah, jackpot.
You guys mentioned that they're saying the nuclear waste sign looks like an angel or something, and it's if you don't speak the language, if you're not from this time, you may not know it's dangerous.
Yeah, because it's just a bunch of triangles in a circle. It doesn't mean anything unless somebody tells you what it means.
Yeah.
I do have a fun fact about Sellafield's illustrious history.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Way back in the 50s, it was Britain's first nuclear power plant, and it was called Windscale. And it basically had a bit of an accident where it set on fire and... Well, actually, it wasn't actually a major disaster.
I mean, I was going to say, a bit of an accident sounds like latchkey incontinence.
Well, yeah.
Well,
what happened was, it set on fire, and then luckily, they'd installed these one of the engineers had insisted on installing these filters that everyone else was like, there's no point putting these filters on there because there's nothing to filter out, there's nothing's going to go wrong. And he was like, no, but what if something does? And they eventually got them put in against like everybody's wishes.
They gave him a horrible nickname as well. Filter Fred, they call me.
No, but they called the things like, I can't remember what he was called, but they called them like whatever his name was, Follies, because they were like, these are pointless and stupid and waste of money. And then they ended up filtering out most of the radioactive waste. Although I think they had to kill all the cows in the area in case they had radioactive milk.
They're probably in an adjacent freezer.
Yeah. Well, they're taking up all the space. Cows.
4 cows is equal to 2,000 seagulls.
Yeah. But yeah, so it was called Windscale. And then what they did was they renamed it Sellafield. Basically just had a rebranding and just stayed there. It's a new reactor, but it's the same site, and rather than calling it Windscale, which had a bad reputation now, it's just like, no, it's a new site called Sellafield. It's literally the same patch of land.
It's like when like a Chinese buffet got like food poisoning, they just like the same owner, but they just changed the name. Like, we're not like City Buffet, we're Buffet City.
We're under new management, whatever that means. Okay, so that brings us to the end. We have passed the baton from topic to topic, and it's come out a little bit grubbier than when it first went in. That chimpanzee is looking rough. So thank you for listening. We'll be back next time with 4 brand new topics, no matter like who's doing them. We might have another guest, in which case you'll hear a wider range. But in the meantime, we'd love for you to get in touch. You can follow us on Twitter at Cooking with Grief, no G on cooking, or email us at cookingwithgrief@gmail.com. And you can go to Big Heads Media to find all our episodes and lots of other great podcasts. If you want to help the show out, you can leave a review wherever you listen to, particularly on iTunes. Give us a 5-star review or whatever you think is appropriate. Subscribe, or most importantly is tell a friend. Word of mouth really is how little podcasts like us grow. And if you know someone who you think might like this careful blend of brilliance and bullshit, then please do send them our way. And thank you, Henry, for taking part in this.
Oh yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Where can people find more of your various stuffs?
Oh, well, if you listen to this and for some reason want more, but I have a podcast of my own with my co-host Dan, and we're basically doing a potted history podcast on the song We Didn't Start the Fire, where we're going through each reference in chronological order. We're like on reference like number 60 something now, so we're basically past the halfway point. So 2 more years to go, and then we would finally understand each reference in that goddamn song. Yeah, if you want to follow me on Twitter, we're on FireStarters Pod on Twitter. But you don't need to leave us a review. We fight the people who leave bad reviews on our podcast.
Okay, like mixed messages for the listener there.
This is my nightclub grinding.
I mean, that's such an old reference in this podcast. You might need to explain that. But hey, well done.
If they're true fans, they would know.
We have one true fan, and it is you. And now you've got as close as to the podcast as it's possible to get. I mean, to be honest, if this goes well, I'm probably fired, and I just get demoted to editor, and then it becomes Cooking with Grief with Chris and Henry, which would be fine. You know, I've had a good run. I've walked. I think that's everything. Chris, anything to add?
Absolutely not.
I'm looking forward to your future guest because it can only get better from here.
That's not true.
Nope.
We might have...
You might have a shit-covered chimpanzee.
I was going to say, we've got all sorts of depths we can plumb.
Yeah, you've not heard the puppet episode yet.
We have also agreed that if one of us dies, the other one is going to just carry on as if nothing had happened, but pretend they've been doing the other person's voice the entire time.
Oh, I thought it'd just be 9 minutes of silence. What is the other person's segment? Well, anyway, speaking of...
That's true. They do get wet. I was talking about socks in puddles. So thank you for listening, and we'll be back next time with 4 brand new topics. So it's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
It is goodbye from you.
What am I supposed to say after this? I don't know the lines. Give me the lines.
Neither do we. There will now be sort of 3 or 4 minutes where we sort of try to wrap up and then get distracted by other things.
Well, last episode, got a xylophone out.
it was a kalimba,
Kalimba,
but sure.
Yeah, you Philistine.
Was that a brass instrument, the Philistine?
Does what?
Always end on the best joke.
While you may think that history is, vaguely interesting, the truth is it's fun and metal AF.
Echoes of the past are still reverberating through our world today, and Body Count is here to show you how our shared history affects your life on the daily.
Whether you know it or not. So, are you past the point of higher education?
Feel like you didn't learn anything from your high school history teacher?
Or just didn't give a flying crap about it?
Are you tired of always missing out on the yellow history pie piece in Trivial Pursuit?
Are you the horror of all your friends' game nights?
Did you once proudly announce that Napoleon Bonaparte was a super short little nutsack?
When in reality, he was an average-sized nutsack.
Have you been thinking about living under a faulty dam?
Or perhaps an active volcano?
Well, we have good news. It's not too late for you or your homeowner's insurance.
Come on over and listen to Body Count, the podcast that explores death and disaster through the ages with only one rule.
Someone, or usually a lot of someones,
dies! Because history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes.
A proud member of the MSE Podcast Network.
I can stomach the racism, but I absolutely draw the line that smells.